That anything that we're doing is because we're smarter than anybody else, you're absolutely wrong. Let me tell you a story about being in high school. When I was in high school, I came home one day, it was the end of the semester, and they had given us our report card, so I brought the report card home with me and walked in the house, and my dad happened to be sitting there in the den. And he saw me walk in, he said, "Son, what you got in your hand?" I said, "Well, it's my report card." And he said, "Well, let me see it." And I have to tell you, I wasn't very proud of it at all. So I sort of half shuffled over to him with my head down and just tossed it over in his lap like that. And he took a look at it and he said, "Oh my gosh." And he said, 3 F's and a D, what in the world happened, son? And I said, "Well, I think I spent too much time on one subject." But, so he said, "Well, son, I want to get to the bottom of this. I'm going to call you a principal." So he called up the school and he asked to speak to the principal. And he said, "Look, this is Mr. Williams." He said, I just looked at my son's report card. He said, "From the looks of things, it appears that he doesn't know anything." And the principal said, "Well, Mr. Williams, I hate to tell you this." I said, "Not only does your son not know anything, but he doesn't even suspect anything." Okay, so this afternoon we're going to talk about how can you use grazing to build soil health? How can you use it to extend your grazing season? How can you use it to do the things Dr. Tooker was talking about and attract an incredible array of beneficial insects, predators, and all that? So again, we're going to dive into adaptive stewardship. Now, I'm going to start with typical grazing though. I'm going to show you some pictures, and these are pictures that unfortunately are far too easy to take anywhere in North America. Here in Pennsylvania, Mississippi, where I live, it doesn't matter, up in Canada, down in Mexico, they're far too easy to take. But this is what a lot of pastures look like everywhere. And folks, that's no better than plowed up crop ground. Okay? No better at all in terms of soil health and impact on our environment or anything else. But pastures that are beaten up, they've been overgrazed, overstocked. You know, you see it's very patchy in appearance. A lot of weed pressure coming up because of that. Again, what do we say weeds are trying to do? You know, this morning they're trying to rapidly rebuild a degraded spot in the soil, right? We see old oxidized cow patties. You know, this is a former cow path that has been severely degraded over time. And then we see these types of things happening. You know, so you're having to spend a lot more money in supplementing your livestock. Now, when I was with the university for 15 years, one of the things that I did was I was on the National IRM Committee, Integrated Resources Management Committee, and we did production and financial analysis of farms and ranches, many farms and ranches. And the number one cost for maintaining livestock, I don't care whether you're beef, dairy, sheep, doesn't matter. What is the number one cost by far for maintaining your livestock on an annual basis? What they eat, right? What they eat every year. As a matter of fact, that cost in beef and dairy herds ranges anywhere from below 65% to well over 80% of your total annual cost. So the very best way and the quickest way to rapidly reduce input cost and to be able to dramatically change your situation is through what you're grazing and how you're grazing it. But we also make mistakes like this. You know, calving at the wrong time of the year. And I was very guilty of this for quite a few years. And now I just sort of knock myself up the side of the head, sort of like Homer Simpson, you know, and go, duh, why did I do that? Why did I spend so many years trying to calve when the weather was at its worst? But you know, at that time, I actually, and I know many ranchers do, they view themselves as martyrs, and so did I. Oh, we're so wonderful because we're out there in this cold and this snow and this sleet, we're saving our calves from freezing to death. Well, why do we have to save them from freezing to death to begin with? Because we're not calving when we should be. And we're costing ourselves an awful lot of money in doing things like that. So So there's a lot of different management things that we can do to allow us to be able to enhance profitability and enhance our quality of life. To be honest with you, this is a client of ours now that he called us up last year. I took these pictures on the very first day we stepped on his farm. And he called us up and he said, Alan, he said, I'm spending way too much money supplementing my cattle in the wintertime, paying for fertilizer in the growing season, and I still can't seem to grow enough grass to feed my cattle like I think I should. So we drove out there in his pickup, and immediately, as soon as I saw these pastures, I immediately knew what type of grazer he was without even having to ask him. He was a set stock or continuous grazer. And you can tell by the picture here, very patchy in appearance, weed pressure coming in, old oxidized cow patties, the whole bit. Now, ironically, right that very day when we were there looking over these pastures, the local co-op or fertilizer buggy comes driving through this gate slinging nitrogen on his pasture. So he wrote a check that day for nitrogen, right? Paid for nitrogen. But look at these pictures down here. Now, when it gets hot, this is down south, gets hot, so the cattle shade up in the heat of the day. What do you see here and here? Okay. Tons of fertilizer. There's your N, your P, your K, your calcium, your zinc, everything. Everything you want to imagine, it's all right there. And to excess, so much excess that it's starting to kill his shade trees. Nutrient overload. So he's got all the nutrients he could ever need to completely fertilize these pastures right here, and yet he just wrote a check that very day to sling nitrogen, synthetic nitrogen, out on those pastures. Now, as my partner Gabe Brown likes to say, he wants to sign the back of the check, not the front of the check, right? That should be what we all aspire to do, is sign the back of checks, not the front of checks. And by the way, in the atmosphere out here and right here, what percent of that is nitrogen? 78%. So over every acre, every day of the year, how much nitrogen is sitting over every acre? 32,000 tons. 32,000 tons of nitrogen sitting over every acre, and we're writing checks for nitrogen. Why are we doing that? Is that our fault? Or is that 32,000 tons just ain't quite enough? It's our fault. Okay? So we got to figure out how we cannot do that. So, whose fault was this? That all of the nutrients are here instead of here? Is that the fault of the cattle because they don't know they can take a poop, a frass, right? They don't know that they can frass in the pasture. They think they got to do it under the trees, right? No, it's management's fault. It's not the livestock's fault that it's all concentrated here. He allowed that to happen. So what is adaptive grazing? Okay? Adaptive grazing is just simply a form of grazing that allows a practitioner to address multiple goals and objectives. It is not a routine or a rigid practice. It is not a formula. It is not a recipe. And don't make it one. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to restore the carbon cycle. Fully functioning carbon cycle. So what are the keys? Well, first of all, it's goal-oriented, and we can achieve multiple goals at the same time with adaptive grazing. Secondly, it's predicated on stock density and not stocking rate. So what's the difference? What's the difference? Stock density is pounds per acre, and stocking rate is what? Head per acre, or acres per head, right? This doesn't matter at all. This is what matters. If I have this, I'm never going to have to worry about that. Ever. Ever. I don't even have to think about stocking rate if I get my stock density right. Stocking rate will automatically correct itself in that regard. Management and flexibility are key, as are frequent movement and frequent rest. And we look for plant root system recovery, not just above ground recovery of the plants, but we want to pay attention to what kind of recovery we have in the roots beneath the ground. And in many regions of North America, it's highly reliant on temporary fencing technology. Now, we're very lucky today that we have outstanding temporary fencing technology. Polywire, solar panel energizers, plug-in energizers, battery-powered energizers, tread-in post, and it's also cheap, very cheap, compared to putting in permanent fencing. As a matter of fact, on our farms and ranches now, we do not want hardly any permanent interior fencing whatsoever, because it just simply gets in our way. It gets in my way. Because if I'm adaptively grazing, I'm constantly altering where I'm locating those fences for the paddocks every year and even every time that I come back to a single area. And so permanent interior fencing just sort of interferes with what I want to try to do. And any permanent interior fencing that I do have, what do you think it is? It's a single strand of high tensile wire. I don't ever need more than one strand interior, folks. It's just not necessary. So why spend all of that extra money? So, and we can power, for instance, there's high joule energizers now that work off solar panels. I can take a 40 to 60 watt solar panel, deep cell marine battery, high joule energizer, and power 400 to 500 acres off that single unit. So it's pretty darn cost effective, very, very cost effective. Now, we do work with clients who have very, very large ranches, ranging from several hundred thousand to over 1 million acres out west, in the western US, western Canada, down in Mexico and all of that, in Australia, and on the movement of our livestock, on operations that size. How do we get our livestock to move, have the density and the movement and all of that that we desire? What do? Okay, horses, cowboys and cowgirls on horseback, right? Vaqueros, buckaroos, whatever you want to call them, depending on where you are. And they can do this highly efficiently and effectively, and it pays. Because I can have one cowboy, one cowgirl for every 600 to 800 cows, or steers, depending on what I'm running. And it works very, very well. And the cattle learn very quickly, in a very short period of time, basically how to move themselves. And the cowboys and cowgirls are just out there to just sort of make sure everything's going smoothly. Now, what's the one thing a cowboy and cowgirl does not want to do? Get off their horse, right? You put them afoot, and they're not very happy. So we want to keep them happy. We let them stay on horseback all day long and help make sure the cattle are going where we want them to go and they're at the right density. And this works very well, and I'm going to show you how well in a case study here in a little bit. So we can do this anywhere using a multitude of methods, and it produces, you remember the 3 principles from this morning? The first principle was what? Principle of compounding, right? So this produces positive compounding and cascading effects. What was the second principle? Diversity. And what was the third? Disruption. Okay? Disruption. So what does stock density look like? Well, this is a 500,000 or 250,000 pounds per acre. That's 100,000 pounds per acre. That's 500,000, and that's 1 million. Now we do all of these some of the time, none of these all the time. And we do many more stock densities. Now our average stock density on a once-a-day move, just moving them one time a day, is going to be between 40 and 60,000 pounds per acre. And it's going to be dependent on our biomass, the forage biomass that's out there, right? But now our average stock density, if we're moving just once a day, is 40 to 60,000 pounds per acre. Now that's a far cry from 500,000 or 1 million. So to get these types of densities, I have to move them multiple times a day across the same area, right? just building much smaller paddocks and continue to move them forward across the same size area that I would have had them in if I just moved them once a day. I'm just subdividing the bigger paddock for multiple moves through that day. Single strand polywire, very easy, very quick, very efficient. Now, let's put this in perspective. The average grazer in the whole eastern portion of the U.S., including here in Pennsylvania, the average grazer, what do you think is their effective stock density per acre? Any guesses? 10,000? What else? 2,000? Nobody's close yet. 100? That's much closer. 500. 500. 500 pounds per acre. That's the average stock density. Now, let me tell you what that's like in terms of recognition by soil biology. It's about like a gnat on the butt of an elephant. The elephant doesn't even know the gnat is there. Okay? Neither does your soil biology. 500 pounds per acre is not even recognized by your soil biology. It's doing nothing to stimulate anything. So it takes density to get stimulation, to change things. And all of these are purposeful. These and many more stock densities. Remember what I said in how some of the ways you can be disruptive by pulsing or altering stock densities? That's what you want to do. You never want to pick out one of these and think that's the solution. Then you've just become non-adaptive. If you just pick out one of these and think that's where I've got to be every day, you're now non-adaptive. You have ceased to be adaptive. So all we're trying to do is simulate nature. This picture was taken by a good friend of mine, Dr. Jason Roundtree at Michigan State University. He was over in Zimbabwe last summer and took this picture. This is what North America used to look like. Okay? Massive herds of wild ruminants roaming this continent. Did you know that bison used to exist from the Atlantic to the Pacific? You had bison right here in Pennsylvania. They were in New York State. They were in South Carolina, where I grew up. In Mississippi, where I live now. They were everywhere. But there were many different subspecies of bison. There were woodsland bison and savanna bison and prairie bison. And the only species that exists today is what? The prairie bison, the bison. That's it. All the rest are extinct. We killed them all off. Elk existed from coast to coast. Antelope existed from coast to coast. All of these things that every one of you grew up believing were nothing but Western animals, right? We all believe that these were just Western animals. They used to exist from coast to coast, and of course deer did. And yet, this is the impact that they had, again, from coast to coast. And this is what it would look like. This is a wildebeest migration in Zimbabwe, Africa. Look at how many miles are strung out here. This used to happen here in North America. How do we know? Because we have written accounts of this. Lewis and Clark wrote about this. That they encountered herds of bison and antelope that were so massive that it stopped their exploration party for an entire day at a time. They were stopped for a whole day waiting on a single massive herd to cross in front of them. Charlie Siringo wrote about this out in the West Texas, eastern New Mexico area. And many others have recorded things like this. So this is what built the incredible fertility. So all we're doing with our livestock today, we can never have that again. We've got cities and towns and roads and farms and everything else, so we can never have that impact across North America again. Unless all of us disappear, right? So, how do we recreate this? How do we recreate those ecosystems that the wild ruminants once created that were followed by massive numbers of predators? Well, we do it through biomimicry and ecomimicry. So instead of wildebeest, or in the case over here, bison and elk and antelope and all of that, we can use our domesticated livestock to recreate this. So biomimicry and ecomimicry. Now, let me show you, This entire week I've heard about wet, right? How wet you were in Pennsylvania, how wet you were in Pennsylvania. Yes, you were. But guess what? So is a large portion of the East. We have been too. We received 22 inches of rain in the month of December alone. 22 inches in the month of December. And it hasn't checked up since then. To date, we have received, since December, just since December, more than 40 inches of rainfall where we live. So we have had an incredibly wet winter. Very, very wet. And for the last 4 weeks in a row, we have had tornadic weather. And as a matter of fact, I've been checking my radar frequently over the last couple hours, because back home, we're under yet another tornado warning. Okay, so we've been inundated by tornadic weather the last 4 weeks in a row. So, but this is a story of resilience. If you can build resilience, and if you're not there yet, you're not. And I understand that, and you've got to take the steps to get there. But let me show you what can happen once you get there. Once you build this resilience, once you build soil health, once you build that aggregate and that plant species diversity. This is one of our pastures at our farm in south central Alabama. And this was just a couple of weeks ago. And again, we've had more than 40 inches of rain. And this is a low-lying field. And we're still grazing. And it's not mudded up. Why? First of all, because we've been able to build an incredible stockpile. And secondly, because we have very, very high soil aggregate. You see the density of these cattle? Now that's not high density for us at all. This is not high density. That's about 35,000 pounds. So for us, that's a low density. But we've still been able to move these cattle through on these absolutely saturated soils at that kind of density through the winter months and not pug or ground up and not mudded up. If our neighbors tried to do this, they would have nothing but a mud bog out there within a day at that kind of stock density. And everywhere that they've been feeding hay, around them hay rings and all of that, their cattle are literally wallowing around belly deep in mud. It's like a mud pit. And you should see them struggling to get the tractors in and out and feed hay and all of that. We don't even form ruts with our UTVs and ATVs driving out there and build paddocks and moving cattle with that much saturation. Now, 10 years ago, absolutely, we would have had a horrendous problem out there. But it's because we've been able to build the soil aggregate and soil health that's allowed this to happen. And just Monday of this week, and we got 3 more inches of rain this weekend. And Monday of this week, I've been up here, but my guys down there pulled this sample. We had a group of chefs. We sell to a lot of chefs. As I explained this morning, we sell from, like I said, up and down the eastern seaboard and as far west as St. Louis for our pastured proteins. But we had a whole group of chefs out there on Monday after 3 inches of rain over the weekend and already saturated pastures. And one of the things we wanted to show them is what our soil looked like and all that. And you can see highly aggregated, and even after 40 plus inches of rain and 3 inches of rain over the weekend, this soil is not muddy. It's not muddy at all. Of course, you see all the earthworms and everything here as well. This is in New Zealand. This is one of our clients there. They have been a MIG grazer. What's MIG grazing? Management intensive grazing. They've been a MIG grazer for the last 30 years. 30 years as a MIG grazer. They called us up and they said, we have hit a brick wall. We have quit making progress. Our sheep are not performing anywhere nearly as well. We're having reproductive problems, performance problems, disease problems that we haven't seen before. We're losing our insect populations and those types of things. What in the world's going on? So it didn't take long at all to deduce, they had done what? They had ceased to follow the principle of what? Disruption, right? They've been a mid-grazer for 30 years. They hadn't introduced any disruptions. They were doing the exact same thing, the exact same way, every day, every day, every day, every year. So everything stagnated, like we talked about this morning. So we went in and we introduced adaptive grazing and stock density pulsing and all that. And these are sheep that you see here, not white cows, those are sheep. And you can see this long line of ewes coming down the lane, funneling in to this paddock here under very high density. And we're going, from very moderate densities up to very high densities and back and forth here. Again, the principle of disruption. And so you can see the amount of diverse or disruption in stock density in these ewes here. They run more than 6,000 ewes. And this paddock here is this paddock here. This is after the ewes came out. So we didn't let the sheep devastate it, take it down to the ground, denude the soil, anything like that, right? You still see plenty of forage left there after they graze there. But what do you see? What do you notice? Okay, trampling, all right? This is what we're after, a high degree of trampling. Now, a lot of grazers say, boy, how did you just wasted a ton of grass? No, I didn't. I just built a boatload of new soil, a boatload of new diversity, and of aggregation, water infiltration, water retention. This is building, not losing. Building, not losing. And by the way, this is going to grow back much more rapidly because you left so much and you're protecting soil temperature, soil moisture, microbes, principle of positive compounding here. Okay, positive compounding that's occurring. We do this with bison. We do grass-fed bison as well. That's one of the proteins that we produce. And we were told by practically every bison rancher out there that you cannot put bison behind an electric fence and keep them. So it's impossible. This is the perimeter fence. If they're out of here, they're gone to town. How many strands you count there? 1, 2, 3. That's 3-strand high-tensile perimeter fence holding in bison. This fence is a single-strand poly wire holding in the bison. Moving every day, just like the cattle and the other species. So yes, you can even do this with bison. Single-stranded polywire can control just about anything if you train them right. So if we look at our manure and urine distribution, if we're a continuous or set stock grazer, the vast majority of our manure and urine deposition is going to be where? By water and what? Shade, right? Water and shade, water and shade. The two places I don't need it. I don't need fertility by my water. I don't need fertility in my shade. I need fertility out in my pastures. So as we move along the continuum, if we're a rotational and mid-grazer, we're getting better distribution, but it's still going to be more concentrated around where we have our water sources and our shade. It's only when we get into adaptive grazing that we have much more even manure and urine distribution across every paddock. And let's demonstrate that. So if my goal is to have one manure pad for every square yard of pasture, and I'm a continuous or set stock grazer, it's going to take me 27 years to achieve that. 27 years. But if I move my livestock just one time a day, it only takes me 1 year to achieve that same goal. Now, there's two very important things about this. First, is that I achieved in 1 year what it took my neighbor 27 years to do, right? I did it in the 27th of the time. But that's not even the most important thing. The most important thing, or the most impactful thing, is that in 27 years, I did this 27 times. So in 27 years, just moving on once a day, I applied 27 more times fertility to my fields than my neighbor did. So what am I doing there? That Gabe Brown loves. I'm signing the back of the check, not the front of the check. All right? Okay, and how impactful is that? Well, let's take a look at, as farmers, we always want to talk about NPK, NPK, NPK. And every soil test you get It tells you how much NPK to apply, right? Okay. Well, let's talk about NPK and the contribution from your livestock. So a 1,000-pound cow, if they're bigger, they'll put more out every day. But a 1,000-pound cow or steer will put out in pounds 0.23 N, 0.15 P, 0.52 K applied back to your soil in their manure. And that doesn't count all the microbes. Okay? It doesn't count all the other nutrients. So if I just have just moderate stock density, a single day of grazing an acre on moderate stock density, then I'm applying that in less than a day. 23, 15, 52. In less than a day on those acres that I grazed that day, at a very moderate stock density. That's what I just applied. At that same moderate stock density, if I can hit that same acre 3 times a year, and of course you can do that here and more, I can do that more in Mississippi and Alabama. So at a moderate stock density, just 3 grazing impacts per year per acre, I'm putting out 69, 45, 156. And folks, if you can't fertilize a pasture with that, you got a lot of problems. That's more than enough to fertilize and keep pastures highly, highly productive. Now, but we go a lot higher stock densities many times, so we're putting out triple and quadruple that on a lot of acres every single year. And guess what? That'll grow. What will that now grow? Okay, I can grow corn and soybeans and wheat and any other thing I want to grow without applying any extra fertility. And how do we know that? Because we're doing it. This is what Gabe is doing. This is what we're doing. This is what a lot of our clients are doing. They no longer have to write a check to pay for fertility for their row crops because they're fertilizing those row crops ahead of time using their complex covers and what the livestock are applying. So as we move along this continuum from continuous grazing to adaptive grazing, we see that with continuous grazing, we've got very poor soil life. We've got monoculture, near monoculture plant species up here, a lot of common and pulling because we have poor soil aggregate and not a lot of life up here, and our livestock performance is not that great. But as we move into adaptive grazing, everything improves dramatically. As a matter of fact, it explodes. It explodes. It's not a linear increase, it's an exponential increase. From beneath the soil surface to above the soil surface. And all of your soil life, all of those insects that Dr. Tooker loves, okay? And when he talked about not having to go to Africa to see stuff on safari, I mean, my gosh, he can walk out in these types of fields. I guess it would just get delirious. Absolutely delirious. Maybe think he's been drinking. I don't know. But, so everything improves. Water infiltration because you got much higher soil aggregate. You get a lot more infiltration. Look at the added root structure and dimensions in the ground. Look at all the birds, and that's another thing that we know. One of the things that we do, we've been working with Audubon for a number of years now. And Audubon used to be vehemently opposed to livestock grazing because they thought it destroyed bird habitat. And now Audubon is a champion of adaptive grazing, so much so that they had us develop what's called their Audubon Conservation Ranching Bird-Friendly Grazing Program. And now you can become bird-friendly grazing certified by Audubon. And guess what? There are some marketing advantages to that. Okay? We have a lot of restaurants and a lot of grocery stores that want to buy it because Audubon is a name highly recognized by many consumers and well respected. And every consumer loves birds. There's not a consumer out there that doesn't love birds. And we're having a really, really nice time marketing Audubon certified pasture protein products. It really does add to your market. So there's advantages to things like this even in the market. And we do see it, and we're also, by the way, generating income because we have bird watchers, Audubon bird watchers who become paid to bird watch because we have so many more birds now. So that's yet another source of revenue. that is available because of this. Same thing with our row crops. As we move along the continuum from no cover crops, no grazing, to cover crops, and then how diverse cover crops coupled with grazing of those cover crops, again, we see an explosion, an exponential growth in life from beneath the soil to above the soil. So does grazing strategy and methodology matter? Well, let me share just a smattering of data with you, and then I'm going to get into case studies to finish out the afternoon. So, one of the things that I'm involved with is, and I'm still a scientist, even though I hadn't been at a university in 20 years, I still do research. And so I'm a part of a team of scientists from all over North America, and we've got scientists from Australia and Europe and different places on this team. We call ourselves Team Soil Carbon. And we're doing a massive research study right now that is covering the breadth of North America, Canada, the US, and Mexico. And what we're doing is we're doing paired comparisons of farms. We're comparing farms that are conventionally managed to farms that are adaptively or regeneratively managed. And we're collecting a whole ream of data. So we have entomologists on our team, and we have soil scientists, and we have plant scientists, and animal scientists, and climate scientists, and ecologists, and so on and so forth. So we're collecting reams of data, but part of that data is soils data. And in these pairs, we started this back in 2014, and this is a multi-year project because we're covering such a broad area. This was collected in Mississippi, but these are 3 neighboring farms. This farm had been adaptively grazed for just 5 years. Just 5 years. It's important to note that when you see the data. Okay? Before that, it had been very conventionally managed. The second farm, we call it high-level conventional, for 50 years they've been doing a slow rotation, religiously moving the cattle every 2 weeks to a new pasture. For 50 years. Every 2 weeks to a new pasture. In the third farm, for the last 30 years, they did a continuous or set stock grazing. So what we did was we went into each farm and at random locations, and we GPS marked these, and we dug soil pits 3 foot deep. And we collected soil samples every 6 inches, so every 6 inches of strata or a horizon. Okay? And so let's take a look at what we found. So in looking at total soil carbon in the top 6 inches in the top foot, after just 5 years of adaptive management compared to 50 years of the rotation and 30 years of the continuous grazing, what do you see in soil carbon in the top foot of soil? It's more than double after just 5 years of adaptive grazing compared to the other grazing methods. But that's not the most profound thing about this data. The more profound thing is what happened all the way down to 3 feet, 36 inches, after just 5 years. Look at how much carbon had been sucked into the soil all the way down to 3 feet. Again, this is triple down there. Triple, folks, over the other grazing methods. Soil organic matter is going to follow suit with total carbon. We see the exact same trends in the top foot and down to 3 feet. Look how much more soil organic matter all the way down to 3 feet after just 5 years compared to 50 and 30 years. And the same with carbon sequestration, no matter how we measure it, significantly higher in the adaptively grazed versus the rotational and the continuous.
So it's probably okay to think that the practices that Alan ascribes to would be good for rain-fed areas, right? Someplace where there's lots of water, someplace where precipitation events occur throughout the grazing season such that you have adequate regrowth. But we know that even in the best rainfall areas, that doesn't quite happen. But what about the more arid environments, these fragile environments? Well, Alan and his colleagues did some case studies and some work in the Chihuahuan Desert, and some of the things that we're going to talk about for the next few minutes just kind of give an idea of how this type of practice of regenerative grazing can impact even these brittle environments. It's all about animal impact. It's all about management, really. So let's see some of the things that Alan has done in the desert as well. So let's consider a desert situation with very low rainfall, very high temperatures. This is a scenario where the group came together, the ranchers and the consultants and stuff, and put together a grazing plan to provide high animal impact on the land to really start regenerating the soils and to make this grazing situation a lot more sustainable. Instead of the typical continuous grazing that we see on an awful lot of Western rangeland, they did some pretty intensive rotational grazing and just focused on short-term grazing and then frequent movements and lots of impact. So this is a typical situation you might see in the Chihuahuan Desert, especially after years of continuous grazing. Notice the lack of plant cover, and the resulting erosion that we see in the panel on the left. These are some more slides that just give a sense of how bad the erosion actually was. Notice the old fence line in the middle picture. So that was recent and that was fast. And this is all because of a lack of animal impact and continuous grazing. Well, when you look at all this damage, you wonder how in the world can this be transformed, especially in the desert where the temperatures are so high and the rainfall is so slight and comes at such long intervals. It's really hard to believe that this is the same desert we saw in the past few slides. This is after several seasons of short-term high-impact grazing. The animal impact allowed animal biology to be contributed to the soil. It allowed for adequate rest of the plant so that they could fully recover, and long periods between grazing events. This is a testament to how this type of regenerative grazing can really heal the land. You saw the results of this kind of management in the past slide. Basically, these producers have reduced the number of acres they need per cow from over 300 to just about 30 to 40 acres per cow, significantly improving the pounds of beef that they get per acre and positively impacting their net profit. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation by Dr. Williams. If you'd like more information on regenerative grazing and soil health, I invite you to look at the ATTRA website, attra.org. We've got lots of publications, web-based tutorials, calculators, and all kinds of tools to help producers to graze more efficiently, effectively, and to build soil health.